Hey guys, Toby Mathis here. And today we're going to dive into one of the most common questions that you get in real estate asset protection, which is, do I really need multiple LLCs to hold my rental properties? And let me just break it into little pieces. I'll kind of do the good, better, best of asset protection planning, but also just show you how fact specific it is. So I'm going to kind of do it like this. I'm going to do the good, better, best first, and then I'll do the good, better, best, and then I'll do the kind of like the don't do. And we'll start with that one. The don't do. Like a lot of practitioners out there will just tell you to go ahead and get insurance. And what they're missing is that they're looking at half of the equation on asset protection, and they believe that they can depend on a third party to come through for them. And that third party, who's going to be motivated by money, is going to do things that are not in their best interest and instead in their client's best interest. And I say this is just erroneous thinking on so many different levels, but I'll just kind of break it out. So like it's really easy to say, oh, you know what, get insurance and a good umbrella policy because you're never going to need an LLC because for whatever reason, that insurance company, even if they're not contractually obligated to pay off a claim, is still going to do it, right? There's a reason they have exclusions and there's all these exceptions and there's contracts and they're that thick. There's a reason for these things, and it's so that they can avoid payment if humanly possible. Like they're not just going to totally leave you out to hang you out to dry. Although I've seen that. Usually, you can bring a bad faith claim against them for that. But like most good insurance companies are going to cover what they're required to cover, and they're going to be looking at it saying, "Did you do everything that you're supposed to do?" And how can we make sure that we mitigate? I'm talking if I'm the insurance company, how can I mitigate my damages and my exposure from people that won't do basic things that they should do to protect themselves? And I'll give you a great example: hiring non licensed and bonded contractors, hiring third parties. Like, how can they mitigate their exposure to that? And the way they do it is by putting on exclusions and they put it onto you. And so every time somebody just says, hey, you know what, just rely on insurance, I'm like, well, I wish the world was that great that you have benevolence everywhere and that someone's going to do something that they're not required to do for my benefit or for my client's benefit. But that's just not the reality of it. Reality of it is if there's something that's causing massive exposure like mold, floods, all these things, insurance companies are going to make sure that they're not the one taking that risk. It's just reality. Like there's just so many things that are excluded. And I've seen people come into my office who've lost more than a dozen. Like the worst that I saw was someone who lost literally every piece of property that she had. And she was an older person, wasn't in a position to lose these. Every piece of property she had in multiple states and her home. And everybody says, oh, they can't take you home. Yeah, they can. Like you might be in a state like Texas or Florida where you have an unlimited homestead. Some states it's 10,000, some states it's 30,000, some states it's 70,000. That protects your equity. It means they're still going to foreclose on your home and you get to keep that little piece. It happens. Watch it. So I look at that and I go, number one, it's kind of like mystical thinking. Well, I've never seen it, therefore it's never happened. Like millions of investors. It happens. It's a small percentage, but you need to protect yourself against it because one little mishap like that wipes out everything. Number two, this type of thinking, it does not help you personally from asset protection. Like I still need to protect me from liability of something. I need to be able to isolate that. And if you think insurance is going to stop it, it's not. I'm just going to say, statistically speaking, you have a low percentage chance of having something massive happen. But it's just like this. If I have a 1% chance and I have one property, I have 100 properties. Now I have a 100% chance, right? Something's going to happen. And the question is it going to come into my personal realm? But also, is my personal realm going to impact the asset? So if I have a piece of real estate, what if I run into I have a car accident or somebody in my household has a car accident. One of my kids has a car accident. An employee that I gave the keys to has a car accident. Because again, I'm using mystical thinking. I somehow think that somehow it's going to protect me. But I have this liability now that they're coming after me and they're looking for things that they can take. Guess what is on right in their realm? if I'm doing this, if all I'm doing is the insurance, they're going to take all my assets. They're going to take my rental properties. That becomes a very attractive target, and you're almost encouraging it. And I've seen lawsuits done against people who had properties in their names for the sole purpose that there was other folks that were way more culpable, but because they had the deep pocket. And I've seen it many times, not once, twice, three times. So every now and again, you have it happen. My partner Clint actually does a really good job at this. Uh, but an attorney literally just admit, well, I mean, your client has money, mine doesn't. That's why they were pursuing their suit. And hey, you can go in front of the judge and say, this is what they said. The judge is just looking at the facts. Hey, like, I need to make sure that if there's a question of fact, it's going to a jury, and I'm going to oversee that. They're not sitting here, their job isn't to sit there and reprimand and devalue it or things like that, unless you're going to have a bench trial. But generally speaking, if you are looking at it and you're trying to get sympathy from these folks, you're not. You're going to the wrong place if you're trying to get sympathy in a courthouse. The whole trick is to avoid it. Stay out of courthouses. Clerked for several judges, spent a lot of time in courthouses. Good things generally don't happen in courthouses, right? Stay out of courthouses. The whole objective here is, if you're an investor, is mitigate your damages. Well, that goes both ways. I don't want someone to take my investments simply because I have them. If I have a bunch of properties in my name, I may as well just paint a bullseye on me. Now, people may not hit you. You're walking around with a bullseye. It doesn't mean someone's going to hit you, right? It just means that in a whole crowd and you got the bullseye on you, they're probably going to go after you. Seen it happen multiple times. During the last recession, we saw it. It was like ridiculous. The people that had assets, if they could somehow get wrangled into a suit of somebody who didn't, because they wanted somebody with deep pockets in that suit, they would try to get them in there. I've seen it over and over and over again over 25 years. Absolutely 100% happens. So that's not a good idea. Don't do that. Don't just rely on insurance. And they're well-intentioned. I used to do this. It's mean. But back in the 90s, LLCs were not accepted in all jurisdictions. And you'd get in a jurisdiction and people weren't familiar with it. A CPA had been practicing for 30 years, didn't even know what it was. 9 times out of 10, they had no experience with it. So they're like, you just need insurance, And I would always say this to the client. I say, well, my accountant said I didn't need it. I said, great. Have them say that they'll be personally on the hook, that they'll guarantee and that they'll follow their advice, and they'll say, you don't need it, therefore I will be liable if there's a liability occurrence. You know how many people took them up on that offer? 0, right? Because they're not going to take that risk. They'll let you take that risk. Don't do it. Make sure that you have some sort of coverage. All right, now let's talk about good. Good is the person who uses an LLC and it's in their state. And when I say their state, it could be in, I should say his or her, but let's just say that they're getting advice, so it's multiple people in their state where the real property is held. So let's say that I have 3 properties, and good, better, best. Good is put those 3 properties in an LLC in your state. And that's actually what a lot of practitioners will do. They'll say, here's your real estate LLC. And the idea is that if we have a house, we're going to put a box around it. And if we have multiple houses, we're just going to put them all in that box. Therefore, if something happens on one property, it stays inside the box and it doesn't come out here to you. We can keep your personal realm separate. So that's good, right? A lot of people do that. They say like, hey, let's just set up an LLC and it's going to be our real estate investing LLC. And here's the fallacy of that. Well, the reason why we call it good is because it's going to isolate your liability. You still always keep insurance. Shouldn't wag my finger at you. You should always carry insurance and umbrella. And here's the cool thing is if you have an LLC, you can get commercial insurance where it's covering not just the business, but also you. And it's ridiculously cheap. Like a couple $1 million worth of coverage for a few $100 a year. Probably even more than that. More coverage. You're probably getting $2-3 million. They're going to look at your scenario, but it's not expensive. Always carry regular insurance for your real estate and an umbrella that's commercial that also covers you. So that you always, I call that lawyer insurance. Worst case scenario, if you have that insurance, You're not paying your legal fees. Like whatever's coming down the pike from these, you're not going to have to come out of pocket, except for maybe the deductible. But it's a lot better off than paying your way. I've seen people go toes up just because they got legal feed to death because they had something insurance wasn't covering. They're going into the lawsuit and they just can't get away from it. They're almost like, I just want to give the house to them. In this case, you're giving 3 houses to them plus all the income those houses are producing. That's why I say it's good, but it's not very good, right? I still have those assets. And before somebody comes at me and says, but there's no equity in it. My clients, these are cheap houses. I've heard that a million times. They don't care. They want the income stream. That house may not have any equity in it, but it may be paying you $1,000 a month. That's what they want. That $1,000 a month is going to be $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 a month over the years. We just had 20% increase year over year just in rents. That's what they want. Guess who else wants that? You get in that car accident. You hit the brain surgeon who's 30 years old, who's got 30 years of top earnings. And all of a sudden you realize, wait, that insurance policy that I got, the $300,000 policy, that's not even a year of that person's missed wages. Holy crap, I'm looking at millions of dollars of liability. Maybe getting beyond the insurance, right? Seen it. Maybe it's getting beyond even your, it's blowing up your umbrella and they're coming after you. Now they're looking at that LLC going, hey, I want your other assets. So that's good. Better is to isolate each property or groups. We're separating those out. We're making multiple targets now that if someone's going to come after me, so again, I'm out here and maybe I own all these. That's why it's better, but it's not the best. At least if something happens here, tenant, like let's say that I have tenant, it's a family, and you got 3 people plus all their friends, so you have exposure to about 100 people, whatever. It's a huge amount. And then something happens in that property. They fall off the deck, they fall down the stairs, something collapses, there's mold, whatever, and they come after you. You want to leave it to just that one asset, and you still have the other 2 properties to fight for another day. That's why this is better. We've isolated out the liability. Again, they're going to want those income streams even if there's no equity. But if you do something, they're still able to take all 3. It's in your state. If those properties are in your neighborhood or someplace, but let's say you're in California, you got 3 California properties, they're going to take those LLCs away from you. I'm sorry, there's just not a lot of protection there. You got to make it a little more complicated for someone to come and get it. But I'm just going to stop here for a second. And I'm going to talk about the idea of an LLC per property. And I'll say this. It depends on where you are in life. If you are just getting started out, you're 30-something, you've got 3 properties. Like, just think about this. A small family, they got 3 properties, or an individual got 3 properties. They worked their butts off to get those properties. If you lost all 3 properties, that would be devastating. If you had one LLC and you lost it. Now let's say that you're somebody who's got other properties. Maybe you got 50 properties and you got other investments and you got a business or something like that. Put 3 in there. Who cares? Put 10 in there. Who cares? Because you can afford to take that loss. The person who's starting out can't afford to take that loss. Like, yes, I could lose 1/3 of my investments and I live to fight another day. But if I lost 100% of my real estate investments because of one liability occurrence, one stupid mold claim, or one, just fill in the blank. There's some pretty big lawsuits, civil rights violations, discrimination. Your contractor does something stupid. Your manager does something stupid, and you're holding and you're left holding the bag, or you're one of the bag holders. There we go. And they're coming after that. If you lost all 3 properties, and that's been like, hey, you struggled to get them going, that's devastating. Somebody who's got other assets, hey, I have 3 businesses, I have some rental properties or whatnot, you may be able to say, I'm okay losing my entire rental property portfolio. I don't care, because all my other assets are so big. I'm just trying to diversify and buy some other things. You might be okay doing the good, right? You may say, I can afford to lose it. That's a very different story than this person that is just getting started out. That maybe that they make $80,000 a year. They've managed to accumulate 3 properties, 4 properties, whatever it is. I'm isolating it. I'm encouraging that person to isolate each property because a huge chunk of their net worth is exposed if they put it all in one LLC. Now, the best, the best asset protection structures do 2 things. Number one, they discourage lawsuits. They make it really, really tough to find things. And number two, they make it tough for anybody to ever take it from you. So the best is almost always going to include a holding entity. And that holding entity is almost always going to be in a state where there's anonymity. Somebody cannot look up and see that you own it. Like in these properties, if it's in my state, chances are my name's on it. Chances are they're able to see, hey, there's Toby Mathis. He's got a bunch of properties. You go to a state where there's anonymity, they don't even know Toby Mathis has an LLC. Zero. And even better, if they did know, they can't take it. This is a state, for example, Wyoming is what we use 9 times out of 10. Wyoming is a state that's inexpensive, doesn't have a bunch of taxes that you have to worry about. It's hundreds of dollars a year. It's like, I think it's $50 a year to renew. You have a registered agent. It's pretty simple, things like that. It's not hugely expensive. You can have an office suite there to make sure that you're domiciled in that state. You can't just have a registered agent and expect to get the protections of that state. But you start doing this, right? You have multiple entities. You start working this up and you're looking at it. You realize, whoa, wait a second. There's a lot of value in somebody getting a hold of my holding company or my entities that have my real estate. I want to make sure that they can't. So Wyoming has a statute that says sole and exclusive remedy. The only thing you can get, you win against somebody, you want to go after their LLC. So you get into that car accident and you cause, let's just say you have a fatality, which does happen, or you have a massive car accident and you really restrict somebody's ability to care for themselves and to provide a living for their family. And it turns out that it was a high income person. You knocked out a lawyer, you knocked out a doctor, you knocked out a surgeon, even worse, dentist, whatever. And it's going to be millions of dollars of lost wages and things like that. And you're looking at it going, oh my gosh, I want to be fair. I want to make sure that I have good insurance and that my insurance is able to pay and compensate them. But I don't want them to be able to get, bulldog lawyer who decides that they're going to make an example of me and take everything from me. The best that they can get, their win, is a lien against that LLC. Their win is a lien. They can't get the properties. They can't get the LLCs. Their win is they get what's called a charging order, which is a lien against the distribution of profits. And you still have control of all the assets. You have control of whether there are any distributions. And what that does, practically speaking, and I'll just tell you from experience, is it settles lawsuits for reasonable amounts. Number one, it prevents frivolous lawsuits. Prevents them. Nobody can see it. Hey, I don't know whether Toby has anything. I can't see anything. Like maybe I could see that you own a house. Hey, his living trust owns a house. I mean, we could even make that go away. But let's just say that it's me personally, and I do this. You can look at my house. I also have a homestead and very little equity in it, according to the public records. Anybody looking at it's going to say, oh, right, there's protections that you can have. You're not going to see. We have hundreds of properties. You're not going to see them. You're just not. And somebody who's looking for frivolous suit, they got to know they're actually going to get paid. Because believe it or not, lawyers don't just file suits for the sake of filing lawsuits. They want to get paid for it. So if I'm going to go after somebody, part of the equation is, what are my chances of winning? And what are my chances of collecting? And that second one is actually more important than number one, the first one. I need to know I can collect. That's why they always allow disclosure of the insurance. The attorney needs to know that they're going to get paid if they bring a suit and they go through and they have experts and they're telling a client, do all these depositions, do all this. They need to know at the end of the day that if they win and they win that lawsuit and they get a judgment, that they can collect on it. Otherwise, that judgment's worth nothing. I get a judgment against somebody and They have a Wyoming entity. I do supplemental proceedings, and I find out that, oh my gosh, there's just nothing I'm going to get. Like, please give me something, settle 10 cents on the dollar. Been there, done that on a multi-million dollar case, by the way. Like tens of millions of dollars settled for single digits, because they realize no matter what, a win for them was still at the mercy of the other party. What it does is it forces settlements. And what it does for our clients, and I could say this for tens of thousands of folks, we just don't see that many lawsuits. Very, very few. Statistically speaking, you're going to have about 5 during your lifetime. And, divorces are included in that. But if you are a real estate investor, you just put yourself to the front of the line. Real estate investors, it's profitable, it's great, it's one of those great areas of wealth, but it also, you're exposing yourself to risk. We want to mitigate that. We want to make sure that we're minimizing that risk if it happens. And we want to make sure, number two, that your risk, you have that risk. You have what, five in your lifetime. One's probably going to be a significant lawsuit. That when that comes down, that they're not looking at these things. And the most important thing is that we're not encouraging it. If I'm looking at defendants and I see somebody with 15 properties in their name, I'm sorry, that's a great, attractive target. I have 15 properties to foreclose on. If I look at somebody and all they have is a house that's encumbered, or I can't tell how much equity in it is, or I can't see what other assets they have, I'm not going to go after that person. I might still sue them if they're liable on something, but I can give you real life example because we had family members. I won't give you too much of the specifics, but it was 2 family members equally responsible on a liability. And it was one of these things where the insurance had an out on a multi-million-dollar lawsuit because they had hired a contractor, and under the terms of one of the exclusions was a particular type of contractor, and that's what they had hired, unbeknownst to them, because nobody reads the exclusions. But they had hired a contractor that caused liability. They were unexposed. We had 2 individuals. One was our client. Number 2 was not. Number 2 had they actually had a big firm that represented them, and they had really competent people. These were really smart people. That lawsuit is still going on to this day. Our client got out, I think it was 4 years ago. 4 years ago for almost nothing. Their exposure in the same, and here's the punchline. Our client actually had more assets. But because the client, the other individual who was represented by another firm, really great lawyers, because all this stuff was just sitting out there, they thought he was the deep pocket. He's the one that's going to trial. Everybody else got settled out. Hey, we're not going to drain the only thing that we just don't know what we can get out of you. We're willing to take. It was literally a peppercorn. And it is still like they rub each other because they're wealthy, but I shouldn't say they rib each other. Like they're sitting there, the one relative makes fun of the other. The other one's sense come into the fold. Like there's not much we can do when you already have a liability occurrence, but there's already discussions of what they're going to do after this, assuming that they still have anything when it's all said and done. They're just getting really, really shook down. Like they're the deep pocket on a liability occurrence that the insurance company turned their back on, and they're going to be paying a lot more than what they should or what they had thought that they were going to be exposed for, and they're going to be on the hook for it. And it was because of this. They stayed up here. They stayed up here and here. And as a result, they could see everything, and their lawyers have their ears back going, I can see what you got. I know what's there. It's like knowing the gold is in the safe. Remember Geraldo Rivera when he opened up the safe? It was like some mobster's safe or something, and they open it up and there's nothing in there. Like most lawyers aren't willing to do that. They're not willing to take that risk. Let's go to fruition. We're going to get all these experts. We're going to go to trial, and I'm going to spend 3 weeks in trial, and we're going to get a safe, and we don't know if there's anything in it. They're not willing to do that. Most lawyers are going to say, I need to know there's something in the safe. If I know that there's $10 million in the safe, there's $10 million cash sitting in a safe. I want the safe. I will go after the safe. If I can't see what's in the safe, I have no clue what's in the safe, there's no way for me to find out, it's always a mystery, guess what? They're not going to do it. We see it over and over and over and over and over again. It's not even a question. If you have somebody telling you differently, then I would invite you to do the same thing I used to do, which is say to that person, great, will you personally guarantee and cover me if I do find that exposure? I will follow your advice, but I want you to put your money where your mouth is. If you believe in your advice, just go ahead and say, great, if I ever get sued, you'll defend me. You'll pay for my lawyers. Nobody's going to do it. They're going to look at you like you're a freak and they're going to be offended, right? That tells you something right there. Make sure that you get the protection. Two sides, the anonymity and the actual protection protects you. Make sure that somebody's not taking your assets away. If you accumulate investments, it protects your investments from being taken away from you. On the flip side, we still have the protections inside the entity. Now, I haven't jumped into the different types. We've been using LLC for my examples, but it might be a series LLC. It might be land trust, depending on your state. Florida, for example, gives protections. You might use a statutory trust, like Wyoming has statutory trusts. We use them a lot of times in California so that you don't have to get hit with that $800 franchise tax. There might be different boxes that go in there, depending on your facts and circumstances. And believe it or not, everybody's facts and circumstances are different. That's why you talk to a professional who knows what they're doing, who does this stuff day in and day out, and you make sure that you're getting good advice. It's not even hard, guys. Usually you're like saying, okay, I got Indiana properties, I got this, that, and the other. You look, all right, what's the exposure? Here we go. Probably going to be LLCs here. Hey, we got Texas. We got 10 properties there. Okay, let's use a series there. It's a lot cheaper. We'll use a series LLC there. Now you got a bunch of California. Oh, the franchise tax. Oof. You know, you one or two properties, not too worried about. You start getting into multiple properties, you're probably going to say that franchise tax is something I want to avoid. We're still going to have it, but we might just have it for a parent. We might not have it for all the little subsidiary entities. Hey, I have some properties in California, in Florida. Hey, you know what? We can avoid having to even go in and incurring a fee. This stuff is free to operate. It's really great, and you might be like, oh, great, you know, and you develop a structure. And at the end of the day, you have anonymity if you're doing it right. Like, I don't care what state you're in, we can get a real piece of real estate out of your name and into something that does not tie you to the property. If that is your concern, any jurisdiction, I'm sorry, anybody who tells you differently doesn't know all the tricks of the trade and how it actually works. I can set up an entity in a jurisdiction, and I can have it own another entity in another jurisdiction and keep my name off of that. Even in the jurisdiction where you believe you have disclosure, you're disclosing the anonymous ownership entity, and it keeps your name out of it. There's always a workaround, and land trusts work in all 50 states. It doesn't, like, there's so much crap information out there. Talk to somebody who does this, does it day in and day out, and your eyes will get open because they've lived it. And talk to somebody who's an investor. I'm not saying call me. I'm an investor. We have hundreds of properties. We've been sued upside down on some of those things. Like, you get little things going on. Somebody comes after you. We've had 3 fires that destroyed properties. Thank God nobody died in any of those. But we've had everything you could think of a landlord. We've been doing this for 20 plus years. Clint, my partner, has been doing this since he was a little kid. His dad had apartment buildings. That's what he grew up doing. You see just about every scenario. And then you start realizing that the people that do it do something very differently than the people that read it out of books and start telling you advice. Like, if you want good advice, talk to the people and talk to professionals that do this, and they'll say, oh, this is what I do for myself, right? And if they are of size, I'm not talking to somebody who's just getting started, maybe they have 20 properties or less and they're new. You want to talk to somebody that's got sizable investments because they start looking at it differently. And then you want to talk to somebody who understands the difference between somebody who's getting started and why there is no cookie cutter answer. Should I put a property should I have an LLC for each piece of property I own? It depends on your circumstances and your ability to roll with punches and handle loss. If it would cause you, it would be nightmarish for you to lose all your properties, but you want to make sure they're separated. If it's, hey, this is, I've got several hundred properties, I'm okay. 20% of them, I wouldn't lose any sleep. I could lose 20% of my properties and it wouldn't bother me. Okay, then you want to make sure that they're separated in at least 5 different LLCs, right? You see how that works? There's not an answer that's a cookie cutter answer to these questions. As much as people would love to pretend and would espouse advice and things like that, you want to look and say, it depends on you and your comfort level. I've had people say, I don't want my name on anything. I'm a therapist. I work with people, or whatever. I'm famous or whatever, and they do not want anybody to know any of the properties that they own. That's a valid concern for them, and that's a different structure than somebody who just got started and they have their first property, right? There's not a cookie cutter for it, and it's not something that you just sit there and put blinders on. You have to listen to the individual. That's the investor. You have to listen to the individual to see what their risk tolerance is, or what their exposure is, what their other things. Like, hey, if I am a doctor and I know I have lots of personal exposure, and I know that there are lawyers out there that would love to go after me if I have deep pockets. They already think I do because I'm a doctor, but I prove it because I got 50 rental properties in my name. I just put a bullseye on my back, right? You got to look at this objectively and say, how do I keep from inviting these creatures into my life? We call it attorney be gone. You don't want your dog jumping up on your couch, you put doggy be gone on it. You don't want a lawyer jumping all over your stuff, you put attorney be gone on it. How do you put attorney be gone on it? Make it look like it's worthless. Because guess what attorneys aren't in the habit of? Suing homeless people or people that look like they have nothing. I'm not saying be homeless, but I am saying don't have a bunch of stuff to make it easy for someone to identify you as a deep pocket, because they might just enjoy reaching their hand into that deep pocket, or what they perceive as a deep pocket. And now you have somebody's hands in your pockets, and that's uncomfortable. I don't like it when somebody puts their hand in my pocket. I don't think you would either. So here's a way to prevent it. You put the attorney be gone. You go the best way, which is we've been structuring folks, especially substantial asset folks, this way with phenomenal results. Like, I can sit here and tell you with tens of thousands of clients, over 50,000, I've never seen one lose everything. I've never seen anyone have a huge chunk of their estate taken away. I have seen it on the other side many, many times. And we've gone through the recession where you had implosion of real estate and there was lawsuits everywhere for developers, this guy, that guy, and we had amazing results. And we could say, this stuff works 100%. I don't have to sit here and play that lawyer game. Nothing's guaranteed. Yes, nothing is guaranteed, but this stuff works. It's way better than everything else. Way better. And that's my personal experience. And I can say that's my experience with my clients. And we've been watching this as the waters we've been swimming in for years and years and years. So listen to people who do this. Get the other people out of your life, because they're just going to cause you problems. Hey, if you like this kind of information, do 2 things for me if you can. Number 1, subscribe. Makes a big difference to us. And then you get notified when we put new content out. Number 2, share it with somebody else. Just please, if you think somebody could benefit from this information, we don't get paid to do this. We don't get paid to put out videos and things like that. I like sharing information. We're teachers first. And I also believe that anybody can create a legacy if they want to. If you watch the estate planning stuff, you'll see that we're big on the 200, 300-year plan. And we love to help people get to that point. We love watching that. And we love encouraging people. So if you could do those 2 things, it's easy. I think probably my internet guys are going to say smash the like button. Subscribe, awesome. Share it with people. And then if you have ideas that you want us to cover, please put it into the comments. That's where we get the ideas for our videos. Thanks, guys.